Well, this Friday, French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu survived two no-confidence motions, one put forward by the far left, the other by the far right. Last year, Lecornu made headlines after pledging not to force a budget bill through Parliament without a vote. This week, he made news again for doing the exact opposite, invoking the ever-controversial Article 49.3 of the French Constitution to bypass a parliamentary vote on part of his budget bill. And he only made that move after 3 months of deadlocked discussions in France's National Assembly. This is what he had to say earlier.
When debating doesn't lead to any solution, one must take responsibility. Engaging our government down this road is anything but an easy way out or a shortcut. It's the tool we have when there is no other solution.
For more, we can speak to Paul Smith from the University of Nottingham. Hello to you. Paul, when we saw what played out at the French National Assembly this Friday, did it go about as you expected?
Yes, pretty much exactly as I expected. The two motions failed. The far right motion was pretty much them alone, and then on the other side, the left-wing motion was supported by the far right, one or two other people, but failed as well, came 20 votes short. So it's pretty much exactly what I expected. And then the announcement that he's going to put the next bit of the budget through using 49.3 again. So we'll have the same process. So this dance is what we expected, yeah.
Yeah, and when we heard Lecornu's comments before those votes were held, he said, look, if debate doesn't lead to any solution, someone must take responsibility. But at the same time, the opposition is saying 49.3 is unconstitutional. How do you see this?
Well, it's not unconstitutional because it's there.
It's in the Constitution,
and
yeah.
It's always yeah, absolutely. It is literally in the Constitution. But I think what they're playing, I mean, particularly the right, it's very interesting that there's a slightly different discourse on the far left. One of the key players actually is what's called the rapporteur, the deputy who's responsible for sort of guiding or replying to the budget, and he's actually from La France Insoumise, and he said that this is a budget that promises to do one thing, but actually it doesn't. It's not going to help people on lower incomes. It just helps the rich, whereas Le Pen very much in her criticism presenting her motion of censure said this is, he's broken his promise. But we kind of knew this was coming before Christmas, once the social security budget had gone through. And of course, that went through under the normal legislative process. Even by then, some socialists were saying, actually, maybe we'll have to use 49.3 to get the budget through. Not that we absolutely agree with the overall budget, but it was already beginning to be conceded. And of course, what we've seen, the reason that these motions of censure have failed is that both the socialists to the left of the centre bloc and Les Républicains to the right, even if they don't like the whole of the budget, are not willing to bring the government down. And of course, you need to have an absolute majority, which today stands at 288 votes. You'd have to have that to get the motion through.
Yeah, and so we got another busy week ahead of us, Paul. Next week, tell us what to expect.
Well, next week we'll have, your motion of no confidence, your censure motion there's a 48-hour cooling off period. We don't really need that, to be honest, because I think the votes will fall pretty much in the same way. So what's going to happen next week is that the expenditure part, the budget is broken into two parts. So we've seen the income part has gone through. The next will be the expenditure, and that will be dealt with. Those motions of no confidence or censure will be dealt with in the early part of next week. But then there are other legislation that Macron and Lecornu want to deal with. The Assisted Dying Act, for example, is still there to be dealt with, and there are other pieces of legislation that the government wants to move on to. So it's still going to be a very lively legislative week next week.
Yeah, and where is public support for Article 49.3? Is this something that people support? Is this something that people see as a necessary evil, or do people want it withdrawn?
Yeah, I think that there was an interesting opinion poll over the weekend that said that 7 out of 10 French people don't like it being used. But I think that there's something to be said for. There was quite an interesting article by Bastien François, a French political scientist, saying that there's 49.3 and there's 49.3. I mean, there's kind of this idea of 49.3 could be used as a steamroller, or it can be negotiated. And this is what we've seen. And I think that there's something to be said for Le Cornu's position that, you try to say to Parliament, this is your responsibility. And that word responsibility is important. Of course, he used it. This is your responsibility. We're negotiating the budget. Let's sort this budget out. And that was always his, what they call la méthode. His method was to try to bring all the various groups on side and try to find a consensus somewhere in the center of French politics. But in the end, that doesn't work, or it didn't work. And I think the ordinary French, most French people, yes, when they're asked 49.3, do you like it? No, we don't like it. But do you want a budget? Yes, we want a budget. So, you have to kind of balance those things up. So I think that most French people don't like it, but as you say, a necessary evil at key times, because there are people who, if there's no budget, they don't get paid, agricultural subsidies, for example. So, France needs a budget.
Yeah, and they need a certain savoir-faire, I guess, with the 49.3. Paul, thank you very much. Paul Smith speaking to us there.